hi, I'm Trent Lapinski, and I'm the CEO of CyberChimps. Before CyberChimps, I used to do internet marketing and web development at Playboy. Before that, I was with two of the original founders of MySpace at a startup. I've also done consulting with a medical research company and a couple other companies. Before that, I started out as a blogger. I started an Apple News and Rumor website when I was in high school. So that was actually my introduction to blogging, and I was a writer. So I'm also more of a designer than a programmer. So my presentation is going to be a little more design focused, which comes in handy because we're talking about responsive design. So what is responsive design? Responsive design is a mobile-first design philosophy to help web designers and developers build websites that can be viewed optimally on any device, such as smartphones, tablets, and desktops. It allows one website to work on every screen size without the need for an app or a plugin. So I'm sure a lot of you have probably noticed on your mobile devices when a website is responsive or not, because it will actually look good if it is responsive. Whereas if it's not responsive, you're going to get the full desktop experience on your phone, and you're not going to be able to read the content easily. So why we need responsive design is we've entered into the post-PC era. So most people are actually accessing the internet from their mobile phones and tablets, and they are not using desktop computers or laptops as much. So this also really comes into consideration when you consider outside the United States. A lot of people literally just have Android devices or a smartphone, and that is their only computer. They actually don't have a laptop or a desktop, so they don't really have a choice. So for them, the only way to access the internet is through a mobile device. So there really isn't a good reason why you shouldn't have a mobile version of your website, because the internet is simply going mobile. So as you can see here, there's 4 billion people with a mobile phone. 1 billion of those are smartphones. So, yeah. And then two, as I was talking about, mobile device usage is surpassing desktop usage now. So more people actually access Facebook from their mobile device than they do from a desktop computer now. And I think that trend, it occurred around February or January, and it's not going back the other way. So if anything, mobile is going to be even bigger in the long term. And yeah, if anything, using a desktop computer is going to not be the trend anymore for most people. So I actually grabbed this from a presentation, Josh Bronton's presentation at WordCamp San Francisco, just to kind of give you an example of how far we've come in the last few years when it comes to using mobile devices. So this was the introduction of the Pope in 2005 versus the introduction of the Pope in 2013. So as you can see, there's quite the difference. I think over there we've got I think there's one flip phone with a color screen, and here, as you can see, everybody has an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device. So I mean, you go to a concert, you go to any sporting event, you go to anything now, and everybody's got cell phones. So the act of holding up a lighter at a concert, most people just hold up their phone now. So again, we've entered a different era when it comes to web development, because now all of a sudden we have to take all of this stuff into consideration when developing a website. So when to use responsive design? There basically isn't a good reason not to use responsive design. As you can see, the pros are your website will look good on every device. You only have to design one website for every device. And then there's no extra apps or plugins or anything like that. I mean, when I use my iPad, whenever I get to a website that takes you to some kind of app or something, the first thing I do is close it because I just want to read the content. I don't actually want to have to download your app. I don't want to have to do anything extra. I want to just read. There's so many websites that I just simply don't visit because they're not responsive. And in terms of development, yeah, there might be a little extra development time, but in the end, it's worth it. And if you do it right, you're really not going to add too much to your development time if you're building responsive design or using responsive design. And then the only other con is browser compatibility. So if you've got a client who's still using Internet Explorer 6 or something ridiculous like that, yeah, they're not going to be able to tap into responsive design. But most of the time, any modern web browser can handle responsive designs. So yeah, so what are the components that make a website responsive? So the main components are fluid grid systems. So grid systems literally show you a grid that you can tap into and design and develop your website within the grid so that you know how your content's going to look in different environments. Then 2, you also want to set up for flexible images. So flexible images are images that are going to size properly. So typically what you want to do is have larger images that can then size down to smaller devices. This is also important for taking into consideration Retina displays. So like a lot of iPhones, MacBooks all have Retina displays now. And a Retina display has a much higher resolution, so you need a much larger image. So you then want to scale that down. So when you're going to a mobile device, but you still want to have a high quality image even when you've scaled it down to your iPhone, because the iPhone has a Retina display. And then in terms of code, CSS and media queries primarily is what's going to detect the different screen sizes of the device you're on, and then allow you to create code that responds according to certain breaking points or different design criteria or different devices. So this way, you can write CSS that will be specific for your use case. So that CSS will only apply if the browser screen is smaller than a certain size, or if it's for an iPhone or a tablet. So that way, you can have specific CSS that makes sure that it looks good on that device. So, and then great thing about responsive design is there is a lot of amazing frameworks that have already done the legwork and the coding for you. So 2 of the big ones are Twitter's Bootstrap and then Foundation. So Bootstrap is my personal preference. I know you guys just had a meetup here on Bootstrap, like I think the last one perhaps. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but Bootstrap's amazing. The next version is coming out soon. They just released another release candidate. It's just a great solid code base. The documentation is amazing. It's pretty much an industry standard at this point. Most development firms or companies or designers have some experience with Bootstrap. Same with Foundation. I've used Foundation as well. It's also a very solid platform. Both of them are great platforms, really. So then when it comes to WordPress itself, we luckily have WordPress themes. So you don't need to dive into responsive design all by yourself. You can get a head start with any of these responsive themes. So there's a wide variety of starter themes out there that use a wide variety of code bases. So Automatic actually develops a theme called Underscores. It's probably about 50 to 60% of the theme files that you need to create your own WordPress theme. So all the template files are already created for you. All the default styles that need to be there for WordPress are already in the style sheet. It is a very good foundation to kind of start building up a website on. It unfortunately doesn't have a responsive grid though, so you'll have to write your own custom media queries and CSS when you're doing some of that. Then I've got one of my themes listed up here, the responsive theme, which you can find on WordPress.org. We do have a grid included. All of our CSS is really well organized and responsive. You've got basically everything you need in a default WordPress theme already there for you. We've got, and then let's see, roots, we've got HTML5 boilerplate and Bootstrap combined. So this is a really solid HTML5 platform and also has Twitter Bootstrap built into it. So you can literally just start tapping into Bootstrap and writing CSS and diving straight into it. Here's another theme by one of the developers, I believe, of Foundation. They've got their own WordPress theme, same deal, it's just Foundation instead of Bootstrap. You've got the Bones theme down there, which is an HTML5 boilerplate theme. And then I also threw in another CyberChimps theme, which is just simply called CyberChimps, which is actually based on underscores and also has Twitter Bootstrap built in. So in my opinion, I would start with a starter theme and look at the code bases, look at the documentation for the different themes, and find one that matches the project and what you're working on and what you're comfortable with. Because ultimately, there's very little reason why you should have to start to write a theme from scratch, especially when you can tap into underscores or any of these existing frameworks. So the great thing about WordPress is that you can literally just install these themes and get going and start working on your design. So when it comes to actually doing a responsive design, you actually want to start with the mobile site first, so that you can understand the design implications of what you're doing and the limitations of responsive design when it scales up to the desktop. So if you actually develop for the iPhone first, you're going to know exactly what you need to do for the tablet version and then the desktop version. Whereas if you try to go from desktop down, you're going to include all these fun little widgets and Ajax and all this stuff that is just not going to work when you get down to the mobile level. So you want to start your development and your design actually at the mobile level first and then work your way up. And there's nothing wrong with including, making your mobile version a little more clean and a little more, minimalistic and adding some things later on when you get to a the full desktop version. It's totally fine to add a couple little things once you get to the desktop side of it. But ultimately, like I said, you really want to start at the mobile first. So this will allow you to visualize what you're creating and optimize your design. So designing for the masses, you also need to think about who's going to be visiting your website and from what device. So if the answer is a lot of devices and a wide range of Android devices and iPhones and tablets and whatnot, then that's why it's so important to stick with a framework or a starter theme, because a lot of those are already cross-browser compatible, and they've already done all that legwork for you. So what makes a good design? So one of the things to also consider is, we're talking about design here. So when you're looking for a theme, or you're building a theme, or you're purchasing a theme from a third party, you really want to get a design that looks good. Some of the attributes of a good design are a good color scheme. So you don't want a lot of contrasting colors. You want colors that blend well together and that reflect the mood of the website or the project you're working on. So for example, red is a power color. So if you're maybe working on a political website or something a little more outspoken, you could use red to kind of reinforce that and give the design some weight. You've also probably noticed that most websites go for blue. And blue is a really common color scheme. That's because it's kind of calming, it's friendly, it gives people a good kind of warm vibe. So a lot of businesses want to try to instill that in their users when they first visit their website, that this is a kind of a cool, calm place. So the big thing right now is fonts. So I used the new font that's in iOS 7 that's going to be coming out in September. So that's what I'm actually using in this presentation. And fonts are critical to a good design, especially if the content you're writing, you actually want people to read it. And especially with these Retina devices and everything else, the typeface is really important. 2, spacing and padding. So you really want to try to keep designs minimal, and especially when it comes to responsive design, since you're having to think about the fact that this design is going to be on a wide range of devices, you need appropriate spacing and padding between all the different design elements. There really is no such thing as too much white space that I've come into play with. Ultimately, in doubt, if you're in doubt about spacing, add another 20 or 30 pixels. It'll look cleaner. So you really don't want your content all jumbled up on each other. You don't want things overlapping, and the more spacing and padding you put into your designs, probably the better. And then 2, again, you've got to understand limitations and capabilities of responsive design. So since responsive design has to be able to adjust fluidly to all these different devices, you have to take that into consideration so that you're not designing something that's static, that's not going to be able to fluidly adjust to a different size. So that's why it's also so important to first develop on the mobile side of things and start and develop your mobile site first. And then 2, less is more. A lot of like web, right now the trend in web design is going towards flat design and minimalism. So we're getting into the point where we don't want a bunch of gradients anymore. We don't want all these drop shadows and skeuomorphisms, and it's really about making clean, simple interfaces, really easy to read content, again, strong fonts and typefaces, it'll just make your site more user-friendly. So let's see. So here I've got just a couple examples of some popular websites, and just you can see the different designs and how they scale out from the mobile version all the way to a desktop. So over on the left, you've got what would be your iPhone size, and then you've got what would be probably somewhere like on an Android, maybe a Kindle Fire or something like that. Then in the middle here, we've got iPad, and then full desktop. So as you can see, the designs adjust and show different columns. At desktop level, most of these 2 designs are 3 columns. When you get down to the iPad, it goes it's either more cluttered or it drops down to 2. And then obviously for the mobile device, it drops down to 1. So 2, there's a lot of different approaches you can take with responsive design because it depends on the project that you're working on. So if you're building a website for a client, and they've got a ton of traffic and it's a high volume site, and you're probably going to be setting it up and they're probably going to hire somebody else later to maintain it, you probably want to use something like Bootstrap, because Bootstrap is something that a lot of designers and other people can then go in and maintain. And then 2, you don't have to do as much of the heavy lifting because you can just tap into the existing Bootstrap framework and code. So yeah, at CyberChimps, we use actually a couple different combinations of tactics depending upon the themes we're developing and what market those themes are appealing to. So for the responsive theme that's on .org, we actually use a custom grid. It's really simple, basic math. It's just as non-complicated as we could make it. The reason why we didn't use a framework is because we were essentially trying to create our own framework, and just really a responsive, minimalistic framework without all the extra bloated code that some of the other frameworks have. So for that project, we ended up doing our own custom code because it made more sense for that project. On the other hand, all of our other themes are on a different code base that actually uses underscores in Bootstrap, as well as a theme options framework that we developed in-house. So that's great because I can hire any designer who knows Bootstrap and has some WordPress experience now. So all of a sudden, when we need to hire a new designer, we basically just go straight to the people who actually already know Bootstrap because they can work with our code, they know how it works. We don't have to take any extra steps or teach them anything extra, really. So they're able to just literally jump right in. So it's really great for rapidly deploying different websites and getting projects done sooner, and then 2, for hiring purposes. So, yeah. So that is my presentation on responsive design. So yeah, gonna open it up to questions. So let's see here.
I have a couple questions on font and typefaces. Recommendations on that. And
Google Fonts.
Thoughts about e-commerce and responsive. And thirdly, I know you mentioned Bootstrap and all those other things. Do you have any other things, or any other thoughts if someone is to go out on Forest and look, or Genesis?
Yeah. Okay, so can you repeat the first question again? Sorry, it was fonts.
Recommendations, fonts, and typeface.
I prefer Google Fonts. They've got tons of free open source fonts that you can literally implement very easily. All of my themes have Google Fonts built right in. I can't speak to other themes, but yeah.
Any that are particularly readable, you think?
I prefer kind of like the Open Sans. Anything. I prefer more modern fonts. More modern that are very clean, have really fine lines, and I like to, like, for example, I'm using Helvetica New for this presentation. So there's a lot of different typefaces within the font. So for example, there's a really thin version of it, which is the word by, if you look right there. And then I'm using like a more dense version for the word design, and then somewhere in the middle for the word responsive. So I like fonts that have a lot of different like variations like that, so you can actually do kind of fun, playful stuff and play with it on your site. So, and the second question?
So e-commerce, any thoughts about that when you're designing that?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a website that's informational, but it's also e-commerce.
I recommend WooCommerce. It is a great, that's actually what CyberChimps uses. It's developed by WooThemes. It's just a really well thought out, it's a really well thought out e-commerce platform for WordPress. There's also, if you're selling digital goods, what is it? I think it's Digital Easy Download is also another good one. If you're just selling digital goods. But if you're actually shipping physical, tangible products, I would recommend WooCommerce.
As a plugin, perhaps, with another theme?
Yeah, so they have most of their themes are responsive, and they sell WooCommerce-enabled themes. All of CyberChimp's themes are WooCommerce-enabled and are responsive. I can't speak to other theme developers, though. So.
The third thing is, I guess I just think, yeah, along the line of themes, maybe you kind of answered it, but I know you put up that list there earlier, but any other thoughts about like Genesis to responsive or any of the out of the responsive things that you could find on Forest?
Yeah, so there's a lot on WordPress.org. So there's a lot of good responsive themes on .org that are totally free, which is awesome. Then Theme Forest, you've got a pretty good selection there of responsive themes. You'll have to read about each one individually to see how they approach it, if they're using a framework or whatnot. And then I know most of like elegant themes, Woo themes, trying to think, page lines, any of those, most of the big WordPress-focused theme companies have responsive themes and are pretty well geared towards the responsive market right now.
But they're not necessarily built on Bootstrap,
Not necessarily.
and you like Bootstrap.
I personally like Bootstrap because, like I said, I can hire other people who know it.
What if somebody just have it for themselves and then later on they might need to have people help them?
Yeah.
Would it matter?
It'll help if the other person knows Bootstrap. So if the other person is familiar with Bootstrap and is pretty proficient in CSS, they'll be able to dive right in. For like a more minimalistic solution, I'm going to have to recommend Responsive that my company develops because it's for that market of someone who doesn't necessarily want to have an entire framework built into their theme and just wants a really simple responsive theme. So, yeah, let's get you.
Can you talk more about your touch option framework?
Sorry, the touch option framework. So we developed that in-house. I don't think anyone else actually does this, but I think we're one of the first. So we used Bootstrap to develop our theme options panel so that our theme options are actually responsive within the WordPress admin. I can probably actually show you. So I'm going to pull this up real quick. But yeah, we built this so that people could actually work on their websites and set up a website from within their WordPress install on a mobile device. So we set it up to also be completely touch enabled, so that you could easily use our drag and drop system. The feature sliders touch friendly as well. So this options panel here is completely built in Bootstrap and is completely responsive. So when you take it down to mobile device, you can actually still control your website on a mobile device. So these are selectors for different like color schemes. Yeah. So you've got tons of options here. And then you've even got your own little responsive menu. So you can jump around to the different settings and do different things. So yeah, again, I don't know of any other theme companies that actually have a fully responsive backend like this. This is, I think, pretty unique to my themes. The responsive theme uses something similar. It doesn't use Bootstrap, so it's not as in-depth as this, but iFeature, Meetup, Eclipse, these are all some of my other themes, and they all use this responsive backend. So, yeah. Did you have any other specific questions about it, or?
No, that's really cool.
Okay.
Do you have any specific JavaScript library that you often have it as a go-to?
You know, we just mainly use like jQuery. Yeah. And I'm not quite sure. I know there's a couple other libraries we use, but yeah, I mean, you can just Google this stuff. There's some pretty good JavaScript out there for touch enabling stuff. And it's, yes. Yeah. So let's see, I think she had her arm up first.
When they ask a question, can you repeat it?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just going back to the starting themes, can you compare HTML5 boilerplate with underscores? I've only used HTML5 boilerplate. I was wondering, like, why would I want to switch to underscore?
So underscores is, so with a HTML5 boilerplate, you're getting a good, like, standardized HTML5 template, more so than something that's designed for WordPress. Whereas with WordPress, with automatics underscores, that's what they actually use to develop a lot of the themes on WordPress.com, a lot of the themes that they release on .org. It's just a good WordPress solid foundation. And then two, there's other themes that borrow from underscores and then also throw in a some kind of framework on top of it. So yeah. Yeah.
Going back to the types of settings, what are some recommendations for a starting point when choosing types of font sizes for mobile? I know there's like a big difference between the style or the type and mobile and just big.
So using media queries, you can define specifically at the iPhone level or mobile phone level that you want to have a certain font size. So personally, I lean towards bigger fonts, so it's easier to read. Ultimately, when you're thinking about responsive design for like on a phone, you're going to be scrolling anyways. Like that's pretty much a guarantee. So I lean more towards really clean, big fonts for mobile devices, so you can easily read what's on the screen. Because ultimately, if you're like down to like a 12-point or pixel font size, like it's going to be hard to read on a non-Retina display. So I would suggest at least like 14 or higher, and for titles, go even bigger. So. Did that kind of answer your question, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you just ultimately, like, the best thing you can do is just try different fonts until one just looks right, and look at it on your, bring your window browser down, kind of like what I was showing you earlier. Like look at what it'll look like on your mobile phone, or even look at it from your phone, and find a font that just looks good on your phone. So yeah, I think we had a question over there, and then I'll get to you next.
I've worked with small clients using commercial names from major team companies, and I found almost universally one of the responses to the demo, there needs a lot of tweaking to look good once you start putting the client's large logo.
Yeah.
So it is, I was interested that you said start small, design big, and the commercial people seem to take the opposite approach. We'll throw in the responsive part for free. The early
Yeah.
isn't a free lunch.
I
Then so broken and the logos resized up.
Yeah. So the thing is we're in a transition point with responsive design. So a lot of theme shops developed a lot of their like themes before responsive design was a thing. So for example, if you're Woo Themes and you've got a theme that you've been selling for 5 years, they had to go back and make it responsive. So you know, so a lot of those theme companies had to go back and make old designs responsive, and they didn't use the mobile first design philosophy when they did that, and that's why a lot of that stuff doesn't translate down. So that's why when you're building a site yourself, or you're looking to contract somebody to build a site, it's really important to have them focused on the mobile first and then build their way up. So yeah, I think we had him and then you.
So do you have a test environment? In other words, instead of resizing your screen, is there a tool out there that shows all the different aspects so you don't have to code everything?
Yeah, there's a couple different tools. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if you Google it, there's a couple different tools. I think Adobe has a couple on their website. I think they've got something built into their their new cloud creative suite. There's a couple. Of some sites, there's other sites where you can do that, but ultimately, resizing your browser windows is probably your best low-tech bet to solving that problem.
There's a Responsinator IS. Just look for.
What's it called? Responsinator?
There's one called Responsinator, and another one's called Responsive IS.
Okay.
You type in a URL, and it'll give you a mock-up of like several different devices from Samsung Galaxy, iPhone, iPad, and different tablets. So you can try those.
Yeah, that was Response IS and Responsinator?
Responsive IS.
Responsive IS. Okay. So yeah, there you go. There's a couple tools.
Another short question. Do you use pixels or gems?
I'm kind of old school. I still use pixels when I'm designing. And then usually my developers go in and change that out. I've been doing this stuff before EMs existed, so I'm more comfortable with pixels, although it's hard because now I have the Retina display, and you really, really can get down to like every single pixel, which is not good for my OCD, so. I think we had one more question.
So I'm an individual blogger and a curator, and I want to monetize my blog. So your themes and maybe your design philosophy in between how you add advertisements and not clutter. I mean, how do you get that in there seamlessly and how it competes with your theme? So is that something you can accomplish?
Yeah, so I mean, the best thing you can do is find a good plugin to manage your ads. I don't have any suggestions off the top of my head. Unfortunately, I've been running my company now for like 3 years, so I'm not doing client work. So my client work experience is a little bit more limited now. But there's probably a couple good ad management plugins out there. you might have to look in, and you'll probably want to search for one that's responsive and that has some kind of tools to help you with that. Because ultimately, you're probably going to need to find a plugin that's designed for working with responsive themes. Zach.
Can you talk a little bit about user agent detection and what's responsive design?
So user agents within the style sheet.
No, user agent detection is serving
Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot, because I mean, is that still happening with newer designs? Because I mean, ultimately, so back in the day, you used to use user agent detection to determine different browsers so that you could adjust your theme or your content to that. Mainly what I used it for was like doing backwards compatibility with like Internet Explorer 6 and older browsers. I mean, a lot of people are shying away from that now and really focusing on responsive design. And then two, that's why I like using some kind of framework so that you know you have cross-browser compatibility with a certain level of browsers. And most the frameworks tell you which browsers that they're compatible with. So if you've got to go into user agents, for specific use cases, you can still do that on top of responsive design, especially if you need to serve up like an IE6 version of your site or something like that.
I can just comment that it's a bad idea, because you're forking your code.
Yeah.
And you're also running the risk of forking the content. So in two places, you're kind of forking.
Responsive design is kind
There's
of
one place where using user agent detection is a good idea, and that's with res. Like if you don't want to serve up your high-res images off the bat, then actually doing server-side detection coupled with media queries, you can use like an old trick to do something kind of useful, which is actually not serve images you don't need to serve straight away. So it's not using it the way it was intended, but you can still use it.
ultimately, I think responsive design is trying to replace that. So we don't have to do that anymore. So, yeah. Any other questions or? All right. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about image handling? In other words, do you recommend having one large image that gets served up differently?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people use a lot of different techniques. Sometimes, I personally hate having to make like 5 different versions of an image. There was a really cool technique I saw at WordCamp San Francisco where you actually take a really, really large image in Photoshop and you save it on like the lowest possible quality. And then when you shrink it down inside your browser, it'll actually get rid of the artifacts if you're doing a JPEG. So so you literally, I think like you need to do like 2,000 pixels by like, 2,000 or something like that, like really big. I wish I can remember the specific name of the.
Actually, there was in a talk at WordCamp SF, and the number he used was you take 2.2 times the size of the largest image you think you'll ever use, and then save it at 0%. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't remember the guy's name, unfortunately. I'm just wondering if that's what people are doing, or if they're.
Since I saw that presentation, I told my developers to switch over to that technique because because before we were using multiple images. And yeah, if you've got some feedback.
There's a plugin from the filament group called Picture Film, right? That allows users to opt in to high-res experience. So by default, you can actually serve a lower-res image, and it's trying to follow the video convention where you opt in to high-res, and after that, the user caches that, and then you'll serve up the high-res stuff. So rather than giving users the overhead of high-res. So picture feels really, really good. The only problem with using that low-res hack is that Google search doesn't like it, and it'll sort of serve up sort of bogus, unnecessary, big stuff. So it's sort of a meta fix.
Yeah.
There is an HTML.
Yeah. The other thing is you can create different size images for different displays at different resolutions, and then use media queries to try and tell it to only display that size at that breaking point. So, yeah. Unfortunately, that's one of the, it's a little bit of a tricky issue with responsive design still, because we're having to use old image formats to try and do something very modern. And then two, another benefit of responsive design and using CSS to do all your layout is it'll actually just also look good on a Retina display as well. And you can use CSS3 to render pretty much anything layout-wise now. So yeah, and you can tap right into Bootstrap and any of the frameworks if you're using a framework, and they have a lot of like the different modules and forms and all that search fields and everything already styled for you. So it's really nice because you can just call that class and not have to spend a ton of time styling every search field. So
Do you have a strategy for displaying data tables in responsive design?
Data tables, I do not have a strategy for that. I think whenever we've had to display any kind of data tables, we've used whatever was on Bootstrap. Because I think they do have I'm pretty sure they have a table system within Bootstrap that we use. But it's not been, we don't get that many requests for tables in a theme, so. Yeah.
So just quickly, there's a couple really good JavaScript solutions for tables that are pretty cool. I can tell you afterwards. The question to you, I just want to know if you have run into situations where using a framework has been somewhat restrictive or created the occasional problem in staying within the framework or creating problems with design or development.
It has, which is where Ajax and JavaScript come in really handy. So yeah, there's been a couple instances where we've had to kind of think outside the box for a framework to be able to accomplish something specific within a theme. But typically we're able to figure out some kind of solution. And then two, we just try now to really focus on designs that fit within, that are going to work well within a grid. And that are going to work well within a responsive design philosophy. So.
Does the design come before the development process? Or
Yes, we do most of our designs before we get to the actual development process. And then myself and my other designers and we purposely design from mobile first and work our way up. And then, we then from there meet with development and make sure that we didn't mock up anything that's not possible. But, and then in a couple of cases, I was told it was impossible, and then they had to go find a solution anyways, so. But yeah, most of the time, we find solutions to most problems design-wise, but yeah.
Thanks for your time. Do you guys use less with Bootstrap, or are we using
Yes.
stats?
We use less within Bootstrap, so it's great because so if you're not familiar with less, it allows you to basically use variables within your CSS, so that you can actually use the same CSS multiple times without actually having to reference or repeat the code again. So you can then just reference that code later on. So it's really powerful because it really minimizes how much CSS you need in your style sheet, since you can refer to things multiple times. Yeah.
What's actually your favorite pro CyberChimps team?
I'm gonna have to go. Well, I really like this new one we just did. It's called Neuro. This was the first time my designers really got to do a theme that I personally wasn't highly involved in terms of the design process. But I think they did a really kind of cool, awesome job. So it's just a really simple, clean theme. My install here's got some weird stuff, but there's some really cool color. Oh, actually, I'll open the customizer. So we built out some really cool different like color options for this one. So you can easily kind of swap between some like predetermined color schemes. Yeah. So the default one is, as you can see, is gray. So you can go in and put your own code in there, and we've got custom CSS fields, and then you can also use child themes as well. So. Yes. Yeah. So this one's I just really like it because it's really just kind of a fun theme. Again, this is not really set up as a demo. This is my local development environment. So, but yeah, just kind of a cool little modern theme there. I don't know if I can plug a couple of the other ones here, but we've got a kind of a wide range of designs. iFeature Pro is one of our like best-selling themes. It's kind of got that like Apple look and feel. It's all touch enabled as well. So yeah.
But what about for people that use PCs, the iFeature Pro?
It still works. Yeah, it's WordPress compatible. So yeah, it has an Apple-like design. It's not for Apple devices. But yeah, these are some of our themes. This one here is CyberChimps Pro. This is basically like what we use as kind of our like so like that's kind of our starter theme. It's just Bootstrap and all the basic stuff built in, and that's actually so we take that and then we use that theme and turn it into the other designs. So that's our starter theme. So and then we also release a free version of that, and then we have the pro version of it. So yeah. Cool. Any other question? Yeah.
What's the main difference between your free version and the pro version?
Free themes, we don't offer as many customization settings, and the pro versions typically have like the different color schemes and whatnot that you were looking at. So our free ones usually are like 1 or 2 designs, and then the pro versions usually have a lot, anywhere between like 5 and 8, depending on the theme. Then we also, we just have more extended features within the theme. So like, for example, in the free versions, you have feature sliders, but I think you only get like 3 slides, whereas in the pro, you can have unlimited slides. So just little basic stuff like that. But the free ones are really capable as well. So we release a free version of every single one of our themes, and they're all on WordPress.org. So, and they're all very capable. But yeah, if anything, you're really, when you buy a theme from us, you're paying to get access to our support forum more so than anything else. And we've got a pretty good support team that handles a lot of questions. So yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I actually threw the presentation up online, so let me go back to Keynote real quick here. But yeah, if you want to check out anything that was in the presentation, at the bottom here, cyberchimps.com/responsive design. I threw that up so you can get the presentation if you want links to like the starter themes and if you want to pull any of the slides. And then yeah, you can find me on Twitter, although that is my personal account, so it's mainly me at concerts posting photos and whatnot. But you can also follow at CyberChimps for official theme news and WordPress stuff. So yeah, cool. And any other questions or anything? Are we good? All right. Cool. Thank you.